The recent negotiations between Japan and the United States have been under intense scrutiny. Japan holds the distinction of being the first country to dispatch a delegation to Washington in the aftermath of the tariff war. U.S. Treasury Secretary Name previously hinted that the earlier countries enter negotiations, the more favorable terms they can secure. As such, these Japan-US talks serve as a crucial barometer. A successful outcome would undoubtedly prompt a rush of other nations to seek negotiations with the US, a scenario highly advantageous to Washington. But just how did these two nations fare at the negotiation table? Two aspects of the negotiation process caught everyone off guard. First, the composition of the delegations was unexpected. Japan's delegation was led by Name, a close confidant of Prime Minister Name. As Minister of Economic Revitalization, Name's primary task is to pull Japan out of its lost decades' economic stagnation. He also serves as the head of the Economic and Fiscal Policy Department, advising on economic and fiscal matters. However, it's important to note that he is not the Minister of Finance, and his actual power pales in comparison. Clearly, Prime Minister Name dispatched him to simply gauge Washington's stance, with no real expectation of reaching a deal in one go. On the US side, Name was initially scheduled to meet with Treasury Secretary Name and US Trade Representative Name. This lineup was already a show of respect to Japan, considering Name's sixth-ranking position in the US government, outranking Name. Still, this level of representation was insufficient for discussing sensitive topics like military spending, indicating that the US, too, wasn't looking to finalize major agreements immediately. The real shock came when, mid-negotiation, Trump unexpectedly intervened, engaging in a 50-minute conversation with Name. This impromptu move was completely unanticipated. Trump's motivation likely stemmed from his eagerness to quickly conclude the talks or to assert his dominance. Unfortunately, all his efforts amounted to nothing, as the two sides failed to reach any agreement. The root cause of this failure lies in the second astonishing aspect: Trump's demands were even more exorbitant than anticipated. Analysts had already predicted that Trump would push for increased protection money from Japan, greater purchases of US agricultural and energy products, more acquisitions of US Treasury bonds, larger military equipment orders, Japanese acceptance of US tariffs, and significant Japanese investment in the US. But Japan's dire fiscal situation makes these demands nearly impossible to meet. Buying more US treasuries or paying higher protection fees would be a financial strain. Japan has long talked about significantly boosting its military spending and rebuilding its armed forces, but these plans have remained on paper due to a lack of funds. If Japan struggles to increase its own military budget, how can it afford to pay tribute to the US? Moreover, large-scale purchases of US energy products would harm Japanese manufacturing. US oil and gas prices are notoriously high, and forced purchases would only drive up costs, accelerating the decline of Japan's manufacturing sector. In fact, these demands alone were already extremely harsh for Japan. Many feared that accepting them would plunge Japan into another lost decade. But Trump didn't stop there. He introduced an undetermined clause, a demand that Japan agree to a condition without knowing what that condition would be. Trump wanted Japan to sign the agreement first, with the understanding that he would fill in the details later. This move was quintessentially Trump, taking the art of the deal to a whole new level, one that bordered on bullying. With such audacious demands, it's no wonder the negotiations ended in deadlock. Trump's biggest headache right now is that, 3 months into his term, he has yet to achieve a single notable accomplishment. This has made him extremely impatient, often revealing his hand prematurely. During the trade confrontation with China, he openly stated that he was waiting for China to call. In the Japan-US negotiations, before Name had even finished their talks, he couldn't wait to step in himself. In Trump's view, this is an excellent way of applying extreme pressure. However, in the eyes of Japanese Prime Minister Name, this is precisely an exposure of his cards. It should be noted that Name is not a pro-US figure. He is a genuine nationalist who dares to publicly demand equality in Japan-US relations and has even declared that Japan should station troops in the US to achieve this equality. Dealing with such a person requires patience. One needs to first understand his demands clearly and then adopt a combination of soft and hard tactics, which takes a great deal of time and effort. But Trump clearly couldn't wait and resorted to rash moves, believing that this would make Name yield. Presumably, even Name didn't expect him to act this way. In the end, things backfired. Name stated before the negotiations that he would not concede easily and was in no hurry to reach an agreement. After the negotiations, he publicly declared that Japan would not shoulder additional military spending. Trump may be in a rush, but Name is in no such haste. Those experienced in negotiations know that the more eager one is to reach a deal, the more one should feign indifference. This principle holds not only in international negotiations, but is also well understood by seasoned businessmen in the commercial world. The failed Japan-US negotiations, the first such talks for the US, have sent a clear signal to other countries. They now know that there's no need to rush into agreements with the US, because even if they reach an agreement early, they won't gain much. It's better to wait and see. Many countries were closely watching the Japan-US negotiations because Japan has long enjoyed a kind of franchise-like business rights in the US. Take the automotive industry as an example. Japanese cars sell extremely well in the US market, while Chinese car brands struggle to enter. If Japan could maintain these special business rights in the US without paying a high price, other countries would surely see hope and might line up to negotiate with the US, willing to pay some price for better terms. But now, the whole world can see that Japan not only failed to gain any benefits, but also had to bear huge costs. This has dampened everyone's enthusiasm. For China, this only strengthens our determination to resist. If the US wants to pressure China, it should at least offer Japan some good terms. After all, Japan is its loyal ally. But now, it's offering its loyal ally nothing but an undetermined clause. With such treatment, how could China possibly dare to negotiate? There's a risk that any agreement signed would be full of undetermined clauses, so it's better not to negotiate at all. Back in the day, the US was able to defeat the Soviet Union, and the support from countries and regions like Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Western Europe played a huge role. These places developed well, making others believe that following the US meant prosperity. But today's Japan-US negotiations clearly show that following the US not only brings no benefits, but also means being exploited. Who would still want to follow? When the leader of an alliance is no longer willing to invest in maintaining the alliance system, how can this system continue? In fact, after the failure of the Japan-US negotiations, a chain reaction has already begun. Some countries are openly making a fool of Trump. India is a case in point. In recent days, Indian media has been constantly speculating that the Indian government is considering importing gold and silver from the US to balance the India-US trade deficit. Just listen to this. Importing gold and silver to balance the trade deficit is no different from directly importing US dollars. Clearly, Modi is having a go at Trump, or to put it bluntly, trying to take advantage of the situation. In private, there are probably many more countries than just India that want to play tricks on the US. Let's just sit back and keep enjoying the spectacle of Trump's blunders.